We are going to be interviewing people and asking them what do they consider the top 3 temptations in the world today, in the young generation. And our first contestant today is Vitaly Lut. So Vitaly, what do you consider the most common temptations or that you encounter?
Talking about other people. Second thing is probably there's males, females in the world, and there's a lot of temptation with lust.
What would you consider good motives or good ways to conquer these temptations and to kind of overcome and for them to kind of not be such an obstacle? And what would you suggest to other people?
Okay, somewhere in Romans or Corinthians it talks about the not living like the world and renewing the way you think, changing the way you think. And one of the things I believe personally is asking God to completely transform the way you think, because if you change the way you think, then you begin to react and think and see the world and see people and see God in a different way. So I believe that will help.
And last question is, do you think that temptations could just have a negative income, or do you think they could also have a positive outcome?
Temptations, I mean, you can fall into temptation and sin, and obviously that is wrong, but temptation can also build you up at the same time when you learn how to conquer it.
Vita, what do you consider the top temptations in the world today?
I think one of the biggest temptations is, of course, lust. I mean, we always hear about it. That's probably like the mega one. But for us as students, I think one of the big temptations is just distractions. Like, say you want to go to church or you want to go to prayer and you've made plans, and then somebody texts you or calls you, and you kind of just just go do what, like, go hang out or something. Or if you're trying to read the Bible and then you like start watching a movie or something. And I think that's one of our biggest things we have to conquer right now.
And what would you advise those people who maybe are struggling with these temptations? What would you suggest?
I guess to pray, so that ask God to give them strength so that they'll stand firm in their beliefs and not be swayed by the temptations.
So Lyosha, what would you consider the top 3 temptations that you would encounter in the world today?
I don't have one, but I mean, everybody has one, but there's a big one that's pride, and it's in both Christianity and the world.
How would you suggest to work with this, and kind of what would your suggestions be to those people to kind of help them in this area?
I would say, well, pride thing is it's like a feeling in you, and you should control your feelings, not your feelings control you. So you gotta stop it right away, and not be too prideful.
Top 3 temptations. Well, missing a curfew is always a bad one. Like, I'm always tempted to miss a curfew, but I don't. It's a hard one. You always have to come on time. And another temptations is not to have bad friends. And it's always there. You want to meet them, you want to talk to them. And yeah, that's the biggest temptations for my life.
And would you consider temptations being only a negative thing, or would you say that temptations do have something positive that they can do in your life?
Well, temptations are hard when you have temptations, but once you overcome them, you feel very strong, and you feel stronger spiritually. Like, you feel that you won the battle, and you feel a lot stronger, and you feel good about yourself. And like in a prayer, you just feel like God hears you and stuff. But while you have those temptations, it's very hard. It's really hard. Sometimes you pray to God and it seems like He can't hear you, but He does. It's just a time that in life that you have to go through.
I would probably say money, sexual lust, and then also the desire to be famous.
And do you think there's ways that we can go about and giving people suggestions or just ways of conquering these things to kind of overcome?
The only way to do that is to be renewed completely on the Word and to replace that selfish desire within you with Christ, and that can only come through Christ.
And do you believe that temptations can also be a good thing, or temptations isn't just necessarily all negative?
Well, temptations, it's a fight between your physical, your sinful nature, and what God wants you to do. So temptations in themselves are wrong. I mean, God can use them. God can redeem anything. So, you know, if you're tempted, you fall into the temptation. God will bring you out, and then later on that'll be a great testimony. God redeems everything when we come to Christ. When He forgives us, He redeems everything. It takes a while, but He does that. So they're used by God, but they're in themselves not good things.
Do you have any personal little testimonies that you can share about friends maybe, or just encounters that you had with anything in particular?
With temptations? I mean, I think everyone has a couple of things in their life, or had a couple of things in their life that were very difficult to overcome. And I think that's good, because then, for example, you might not have been addicted to drugs, but you're addicted to something else, whatever it is, some kind of behavior. And so when you see Christ overcome that, it should give you faith then to go out and believe for somebody else to overcome whatever they're doing.
Okay, the top three well-known temptations I think that everybody has to deal with is money. It is issues of the opposite sex, and it is issues of pride. And I think the way you overcome certain things like this is, I think you gotta have an accountability team. You gotta have people whom you stay accountable to. You have to have people who come to you at the end of the week and say, hey, how you been in these areas of your life? How are your finances? How's your marriage? How's your relationships? How are you doing online? You know, what about pride issues? Or people who can come to you and confront you in terms of pride issues as well. So the way you overcome it is paying people, if you have to ask you questions so that you can stay accountable to someone. Because if you know you're going to be asked those questions, you're going to live at a higher level, higher standard. So you've got to have an accountability team. I want to challenge you that.
And would you say that, you know, with your experience and stuff, with the youth and stuff, that temptations do serve for a good purpose? And maybe share a little testimony, if any, that you could kind of maybe remember.
I think trials maybe serve for a good purpose, and valleys. I think we all go through hard times and tough times to learn lessons. But I think temptations, the only good purpose that they can serve is it can remind us of the grace of God, that we can't do it by ourselves. And so I think sometimes God allows us to stumble. God allows us to trip so that we can continue to be dependent upon the grace. Because at the moment we say, okay, we can do it by ourselves, we've conquered temptations, that's it, we're Superman, we don't sin anymore, then you start to trust upon your own strength. So I think temptations, we do fall to our own to the temptations, and at the same time, it's just the one benefit of that is, okay, we say, hey, we are still dependent on grace. We are still dependent on the blood of Jesus. We can't do it by our own. We still need Jesus. It causes us to seek Jesus more, to pray more and humble ourselves. So, yeah, you know, I see that in areas we all struggle in some areas, and I think just fighting. If someone is fighting, then they've got life. But you know, you take fish, for example, when they're being transported over large territory, sometimes they put an enemy in the tank, because if there's an enemy there, then the fish are all on alert. But if the fish are there's no enemy, they don't have to fight anything, they don't have to deal with temptation, they don't have to deal with struggles, then they just get lazy, and their bones are lazy, and their muscles are not strong, and the fish doesn't taste good. So struggles, you know, they'll always exist in our lives. There'll always be temptations. We're always going to continue to fight them, but they're going to make us strong.
And our Our last question for you today is, there seems to be a lot of encounters with sexual purity and just in the young generation. And what would your just words of advice or wisdom to those that are battling with these problems? Because there is a lot of it going on.
Number one is you've got to make yourself completely accountable in terms of a computer, to where you've got a system on your computer to where it blocks everything. You've got your spouse or if you're married, that has all your passwords. If you're married and there's a password that you're hiding from your spouse, I think you're insane. Your spouse needs to be able to access anything and everything on your computer. And so if you don't have a spouse, you need to make sure, first of all, you've got stuff on your computer, because stuff pop up. Even if you don't want it, they will pop up. You've got to get away from things that lead you into those temptations. And as I said, in terms of accountability, every person's going to be able, we live in a body, in a sinful body, and so we're going to be tempted. But if you are staying close to the Lord, if you know you're accountable to somebody, then it's going to keep you to live at a higher level, and you're going to be able to overcome. In terms of sexual temptations and stuff, that the battle, though, starts with your eyes. You've got to, at a certain point, you need to say, you know what, my eyes are going to go cold turkey. You can't quit. In terms of sexual issues, you can't just quit it gradually. Because there's statistics that says that, you can view one image for a couple seconds and it'll be in your mind engraved for years. And so you can't just say, okay, I'm just going to gradually quit. There needs to come a point where you say, cold turkey with your eyes. From now on, anything impure, I will not allow it to enter my thoughts or my mind. I'm just going to turn away every single time. Just no more, nothing at all. And when you do that, you'll develop a habit. Some people put a rubber band on their wrist. And so if they catch themselves wandering, or if they catch themselves looking, they hit themselves with the rubber band. And so the body starts to associate sexual immorality and thoughts that are inappropriate with pain. And then your body doesn't want to go there anymore because they know it's going to hurt. So do something in your life that will hurt you, so that when you are tempted, the pain's coming.
So today we're here with Tanya, and we are interviewing people and asking them, what would you consider the top 3 temptations in the world today, especially in the young generation, that you have encountered?
Well, sexual temptations, I think that's top. Lying and lying, going around things to get to whatever you want.
And some of the things that you mentioned, what would your advice to those people that are struggling with these things, of how would you go about, conquering them?
Well, I think it definitely has to do with the spiritual world. Temptations, I believe that they're definitely from Satan. So it's just to get your spiritual life straightened out. Spend time in prayer. That's the only way you can conquer, I believe.
And so do you think that temptations can serve a good purpose, though, at the end?
They could definitely teach you a lot of lessons, life lessons. They can teach you discipline. And I don't think any person can go without them, because that's what builds their character.
You're in administration here at SMBS, and a lot of us, we admire you very much. And what would you say, some things that you've seen here that maybe students, or some temptations here that they could work on and maybe go about conquering them? Anything more, specific, 1 or 2 things that you just noticed tends to be very common, broken here in SMBS?
Особенно в этом году и каждый год я замечаю о том, что человек, который был когда-то зависим от греха, в чем-то зависим, но он приехал в школу или отправили в школу для изменения. Но если человек не освобожден, сам по себе он освободиться не может. Я заметил то, что многих сатана, как он и обманывал раньше, он так и обманывает, потому что человек сам освободиться не может. И многих даже Бог просил, но их Бог изменил, освободил. Но если человек, как Библия говорит, что пес возвращается на свою блевотину, и свинья идет валяться в грязи, то есть если человек свою жизнь не занял ничем, И если он даже жалуется, что он сильно занят в школе, дайте мне свободное времени, для меня это говорит, что иногда человек, то есть он не хочет изменений, и то есть человек снова возвращается в свои старые ошибки, потому что он, можно сказать, не занят. И вторая вещь, как можно это исправить, то есть если в первую очередь мы нуждаемся, чтобы нам люди помогли, чтобы нам служили, но мы не служим другим, то есть мы будем всегда эгоистами, мы будем ждать, чтобы нам кто-то помог. И то, что я переживал в жизни, если я нуждаюсь в какой-то помощи, если я нуждаюсь даже в свободе от какого-то греха, я должен в первую очередь начать служить другому, и тогда Бог в первую очередь поможет мне, а потом тому, кому я служу.
You mentioned the topic of sex and how that tends to be a big problem in the young generation with sexual purity and stuff. And you here about to get married and you have a fiance. And how would you offer some advice of how you kept yourself pure and clean, and advice to others to not lead themselves into temptations? Maybe some things that you did that were helpful to you.
Я считаю, что каждый здоровый и молодой человек, у него эти желания есть, они заложены Богом, желания сексуальные, и это нормально, но если наши желания владеют нами, и мы не умеем, человеку очень часто тяжело саму себя контролировать, если человек не обучен, человек неопытный, и очень часто мы можем сами по себе, слабый человек, он может допускать ошибки. И даже в общении, то есть мы должны быть. Если у тебя нет силы духовной, то ты не можешь сам сопротивляться даже с испытаниями или искушениями. Но если у тебя есть чистое общение с Богом, близкое, в общении с Богом мы получаем силу. Если мы в первую очередь общаемся с Богом, то мы можем общаться с человеком противоположного пола, и с Божьей силой мы можем преустоять во всяких искушениях. Вторая вещь, это если человек ищет только искушений и приключений, то насколько бы он сильно не был, он уже глупый, потому что он ищет этих искушений. А Библия говорит нам, что лучше обойди ее подальше. И как Соломон говорит, что человек, который вышел вечером по улице, и там, где идет женщина одна, то есть он вместо того, чтобы обойти подальше, и то есть не искушать себя, не делать глупость, не допускать ошибки. То есть нам иногда можно просто проявить мудрость о том, чтобы обойти искушение. Для нашей славянской молодежи больше там showing off, знаешь, машины крутой там или мотоцикл. Там, я не имею в виду кого-то спецификли, но это более для подростков. Для нас, взрослой молодежи, как я, Тимофей, Андрюша, нам уже прошедший день, знаешь, у нас уже другие интересы, но также уже для людей постарше, для них уже побольше денег, там покруче бизнес, дом, да, на океане, там, Джексонвилле или где. Тоже это для нас, Андрюша и Тимофея, это тоже прошедший день. Нас эти вещи уже мало интересуют, мы больше о небесном, знаешь. Да, нас тянет больше там, чтобы стать такими известными, как Тимофей говорит всегда. Я с ним всегда согласен, но главное, чтобы мы были известны Богу. Андрюша меня поддержит в этом.
Спасибо, Андрей, for your words of wisdom and encouragement. And you heard it here. Build a strong relationship with God, and you will have no problems with temptations.